What's up, Totem Pole Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Lambo and Matt's World of Sports. Today we are talking ball with Jordan Gush, a man who's played college football, coached some top talent in the state of Florida, which if you've watched this channel at all, you know the emphasis we put on the talent that comes from Florida and Texas. He also played ball in Texas. He coached in Texas. He's the man to talk about when it comes to stuff like this. If you want some merch to help the boys, like that cool hat Tyler's wearing right there, TotemPoleNation.com is scrolling in the ticker below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let's get into talking ball right now.
All right. Well, Jordan, we appreciate you for coming on the show, taking time out of your day. How was your day, by the way? Everything good? What do you think about the college football season so far, especially with, Texas and Washington going at it, and then also Alabama and Michigan? Who's your favorites in all those matchups?
Ooh, starting tough, huh? Yeah. I think it's been a great season. I mean, I think every Saturday I've been entertained. I mean, I always find good games on, so I know a lot of people are kind of down sometimes on college football, which bothers me. That all these NFL guys, but I think it's been great. I think even with all the chaos, it's been still great, entertaining matchups. I can find six to 10 games really that are great. As far as the college football playoffs, I've been going back and forth. I mean, I could live in a world where, like say the Washington versus Texas game, I think I'd give the slight edge to Texas, but I think if they play 100 times, I think it's 55-45. You know what I'm saying? So that's why if you're thinking about betting and all these type of things, it's real close. But you give Sarkisian a long time to kind of game plan and to dial some stuff up. That's where he's at his best. I think Sark can dial things up, but everything's out the window with a month break. It's hard to really that's one thing I always hate about bowl games at times. It's like, it's what team's going to stay in shape and stay focused and, no issues. And you got to stay because that's what I do a lot now is I do a lot of private work and strength and conditioning and training athletes kind of as on the side. It's tough getting out of football shape now. You're getting out of football shape for a full month and who's going hard at it, who's properly doing it, who's not overdoing it, who stays healthy. I mean, these things are all good, big questions that behind the scenes we'll have to know because of how close the talent is this year. So, I mean, if I really think it's going to be Texas versus Bama. I mean, that's who I think, that's who I'm going with as of now. And if I had to bet on it, I'd probably go with Bama to win it. But like I said, these games are so close. I could see Washington winning it all. I really could, like I said, because I think it's that close where it's 55-45 type situation. And then I think Michigan, just with all the adversity they faced it all year. And I would love to be in that meeting room with Harbaugh, who he's been able to band together, and kind of us versus the world type mentality and all this kind of chaos they've been going through and how close it's brought them. And now, they're getting a little bit more of no drama for a period of time and they can kind of band together. They're tough, but that old lineman, people don't talk about them losing him. He kind of changed their whole season, really. They were dominant, up front. But at that time, they also weren't playing a tough schedule. So, like I said, there's a lot of question marks there. So we'll see. I think it's going to be some great games.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And if, Lambo is probably the biggest Texas hater that I've ever met. So I'm sure hearing that probably made his skin crawl a little bit. But when it comes to, Texas, you growing up in Texas, or I don't know how long you lived there, but at least, playing high school ball in Texas, you would definitely be the one to ask about, the quality of Texas high school football, at least, is always talked about as being, top of the top. There's them, Florida, and California, really, that you could compare them to. So my first question was going to be, throughout your journey, and I know times have changed now with, the evolution of college football and whatnot, but throughout your journey and what you experienced I know the hype is real, but from your experience, what would you describe, growing up and playing in a Texas high school football system,
Right. And I think the biggest thing, and that's what I try to tell people, because everybody's argues between Texas, Georgia, Florida, all these places. The big thing that separates Texas is it's top to bottom. It's there. I would say Florida has the best athletes. Florida has the best NFL talent. You'll look at the statistics. Getting the NFL. But if we're talking coaching, we're talking facilities, we're talking random teams in the middle of nowhere that are you could learn a lot. That's really where my eyes open, because I grew up in Dallas and I was around DeSoto, I was around South Lake Carroll, I was around Allen. I saw like those dynasties, those teams that are just so dominant. They're 5A, they have all these teams. But really what opened my eyes to Texas football is when I became an athletic director. Well, at first I was a defensive coordinator, but I went to a small town on the Mexican border called Bruni. And, we had $1 million facility. We had this random rancher that wanted to we only had 185 kids, but I worked with a guy named Odell James, who's the guy who brought me down there, who's a Houston athletic director now. He worked with my dad at Baylor, but he brought me down there and was like, hey, we have $1 million facility. We have all these things, but we only have a small amount of kids. Same thing in that whole area. It was all these little small towns that just ran the coaching staffs were paid, handsomely. And it was just like real football. That's what separates Texas when I get into these discussions. It's not like everybody wants to bring in the top tier talent of who's the best and all that type of deal. But if you're talking about who pays the coaches, who has the best facilities, who has the best talent, you have a bunch of kids that are, these kids might not play at college level or FCS or D1, but these kids are machines, and some of the stuff and the scheme that you'll see down there, your head's spinning. Every week when I was a defensive coordinator out there, you're facing a new kind of machine type offense that you haven't really, little wrinkles that are a little different stuff that you're not seeing in the NFL or college much, and you better get your mind right, because these coaches, that's all they do. They're just obsessed with it. The only place, because I used to, when I was in junior college, I used to recruit a lot. The only place that compares to me as far as that top to bottom is Georgia. And not to say, Florida's great. Like I said, the best talent. If we're talking top end talent, pure receivers, all that type of thing, nothing touches like Broward County. But Georgia and Texas, it's just a process of them paying paying. They pay quality coaches and they pay for facilities, and you create quality. And then that tradition of years and years and years. Florida would be the same, but they don't pay the coaches shit. It's disgusting. And the coaches are fighting for it right now. If you go look at. I follow Jacquez Green a lot. He's right down the road, and he always retweeting these different things. It's disgusting how they don't pay. And you go to these facilities, because I coach at IMG Academy too. That was my first job out of college. I was working at IMG, and we played a bunch of teams around here, and like I said, it's disgusting how they pay these coaches and the players. They don't get facilities compared to Texas or whatever. And then what you have is teams that are the haves and have-nots, and it's such a huge separation. But if you go in Dallas, every big school there, they care about football. So you have a lot more parity as far as Allen could go and lose to their 8th team in their district, because that coach is getting paid $150,000, as an AD, and they have real facilities, and they have a bunch of alumni that want to win there. So here, I have Venice High School, which is down the road. They rob every school from around here, and they're the best. I went to the other day, I went and watched, who was it? It was not Manatee. It was Palmetto versus Southeastern. Southeastern is where who's the Willie Taggart and the back of the Peter Warwick. These guys, that school they could barely field a team. And they had these dudes back in the day, but people aren't paying money, and then all the kids in that area are going to different schools now, and all this type of deal. It's sad, compared. So that's the biggest difference. Not necessarily straight just athletes or whatever. It's an industry in Texas, and that's what makes it the best. And like I said, number 2 is Georgia. California, you could put that in the discussion just because sheer numbers, and there is they have the same thing there. They have the private schools that are probably the best teams. Mater Day, you ain't going to beat. I'd bet Mater Day would beat anybody in the country. Except maybe DeSoto this year, which just because DeSoto is one of the best teams I've ever seen. But a couple years ago, they came down and whooped DeSoto. But it's a different team. This is the best team I've seen DeSoto look. If you watch that game, I watched all those games in the playoffs this year. The final 3, that was last Saturday. Some great games, but DeSoto, that's a different team now. So that's my thought process on it.
Got you. So tying it back to IMG a little bit, you talk about the pay, difference between state to state. Does that include? I know it's been 10 years since you've been at IMG, but do you think that pay discrepancy involves a school like IMG that's essentially a D1 program, and the way that you describe facilities and stuff like that? That is essentially IMG in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So does that pay discrepancy go to that school as well, or is it more the public school type situation?
Shockingly enough, IMG doesn't pay much, and so what they do is they have a couple kind of the like say they'll have like the baseball program, the head of that program gets paid pretty good, and but what they do is they know it's a good job, so they'll get a bunch of people that are younger, and so they'll pay a few people. Some people are getting paid good money there, but like when I was there, I was just graduating, and I hit up a coach because I knew of IMG. That's when it was starting to get hype and everybody's talking about it. This is 2012, and they hadn't even started a football program. This when they were like training Cam Newton and all this type of deal, and I hit up a coach and I was like, I'll work for free because my uncle lived out here, so I could stay at his house. And I was like, just because the whole staff, Chris Winkie was the head coach, you know what I'm saying? And E.G. Green was the offensive coordinator. And I'm like, if I could just get on there and just sit in the meetings, and I'll figure out what I'm going to do after that. And when I showed up out here, they were like, what he does, Winkie's kind of an old, he kind of likes to mess with people type deal. He just put me on the board and sat me in. And then he called me one night and he was like, hey, you're going to be able to get paid for the rest of the season. So it was nothing really, not very much money, but the coaches there are not getting paid very much money, not crazy money. Maybe the head guy or whatever. I bet as you'd be better off being in Texas as an offensive coordinator, getting a teacher, because they're not getting teacher salaries too. Like in Texas, what they do is they'll give you like the PE job or the history, and then they'll give you a bunch of stipends on top of that. Maybe you'll coach the stipend could be like 15 grand, 20 grand plus 70 or 55 to 70K for teaching. And then you get another stipend for strength and conditioning, another stipend for assistant basketball. So they find ways to kind of like keep pairing it together. At IMG, you're just like that position. So you're getting probably like 50 to 100,000. And it could change though. Like I said, I don't know in the last 10 years.
Right.
All right. Explain culture. You know how everybody talks about building a team, building the culture. Everybody wants the perfect culture. Everybody wants to be, Nick Saban, the Bill Belichick's of ball. How do you, build a culture like as yourself? Like when you coached back in the day and coaching now, obviously. What does culture mean to you as you're preparing a team to try to do everything right and possibly win a championship, just in general?
There's a bunch of ways to attack that. First of all, there's a bunch of different philosophies, and you have a Nick Saban who's more, just old school, like by the book. I mean, do what you're supposed to do. Like we've always known about football. And then you have Mike McDaniel. The biggest thing is what everybody's on the same page, and there's no bullshit. There's no line. There's no, we're all in the meeting together. We're all open and honest. We know what everybody's expectations are. Nobody's delusional about what their role is. And everybody's on the same thing. And if that's good and that's understood, your culture is going to be fine. As long as there's not a bunch of people backstabbing everything and doing all these, kids getting lied to. If everybody's on that same page and pushing the rock the same way, I mean, you can come up with all these rules and all this type of deal, but it's be a good person and don't affect the team in a negative way. And let's roll, and just be on the same page and don't lie to each other. And then when you have an issue, you come and just air it out. Don't be, going behind people's backs and, going up into the dorms, talking shit, smoking blunts, getting all and causing issues. Right. I mean, that's what you have on bad teams. And then because it's on bad teams and good teams, people don't realize. And a lot of good teams, obviously, what are you going to have? You're going to have a lot of guys that aren't getting the ball still. Like when I was in junior college, I would have 25 kids, especially when it started in the summer, you'd get about 25 to 30 kids. You can only play 3 or 4. A good amount of time. So you're going to eventually, you have to stay on time. That's tough to manage, so even in the best cultures, you're going to have a lot of issues behind the scene. It's just a matter of, can you stay on top of it? Can you make sure you're communicating with them and just don't lie to them? And then hopefully you won't get into a bad situation. But I'd say just the number one, because you could come up all these commandments and all this type of deal. But I think if you keep it, the less rules, the better, in my opinion. Because if you're like, I had a coach who was a great coach, but we would have to White Sox, all these things. And that's tough because you're constantly fighting. And then you're constantly having to get on a kid's ass, which is tough because, they feel disrespected and all these things. And then you might be in a bad mood and you see a kid with a hoodie on or whatever. And you're like, God damn it, do I have to do this shit again? Yeah. So like you keep getting in these situations where you're always making these rules, you're going to create possible issues that can flare up. So, I mean, my biggest thing is just as long as you communicate and like just making sure they're showing effort, and those type of things and not being an idiot off the field, you'll keep a good culture. But that's tough. I mean, it's like I said, and, because it's the same with your coaches too. I mean, the big thing you'll see in these staffs is, once things start falling apart, you have a couple coaches that start talking shit behind their back and they start trying to navigate and, thinking about getting out or, how maybe they could get the head coach fired and they can get the job. These things are all, tough to deal with. And that's something you have to have a process for when you're in those situations. But a lot of that, lot of those drama situations, why I got out of coaching, though, let me tell you, I mean, that's why I have my own business and I do my own thing, is because that's, like I said, that's tough. And then you have to deal with, if your kids do something off the field, it's your responsibility nowadays, especially, I mean, they blame you as a coach. They say, oh, you're not taking care of the kids, all this type of deal. When I've seen some of the most, hard ass coaches that, there are a couple kids at their school got into some trouble and it's their fault and they get fired. So it's tough. It's tough to manage and to create that culture properly. But like I said, just to keep it short for that answer, it's just be consistent with how you're being honest with the players and the coaches. And it starts with the head coach. He has to be honest with the role of the head coaches. So other coaches aren't stepping on the other coaches' foots too, because you'll have that as like an OC, and then he's calling the plays, but the O-line coach is, he wants to run the ball more. And so you have to just get everybody on that same page and have open and honest conversations and not let shit just get. And then you can't be, the head coach can't be scared or create an issue where the coaches are scared to tell him things. That's where another thing where you can fuck the culture up. The coaches have to be not scared to like question him a little bit, but also know your situation. And because I've been on some staffs that some coaches won't shut up about certain things. And I think when I was a young coach, I would bring up dumb shit too. You're like, and I could see the other older coaches be like, wait, why are you bringing that up? Like, let's not go, you know what I'm saying? Because you just have to know, and sometimes I was right in that maybe, but it's like, let's know the situation and know the timing and, let's know the roles of everybody. So know your roles and, just communicate. That would be it.
For sure. Piling on to not the exact same question, but you were, like you mentioned, at, community college for Scott. Everyone has seen, Last Chance U on Netflix and all this shit. So obviously the JUCO and community college world was brought to a light, and in my opinion, kind of dramatized. You had to make it good for TV or Netflix or whatever. But I was like, one of my first questions, I looked at your LinkedIn before this to get some information or whatever, and saw that you coached there. My first question in my head was, what's the difference between the way that they presented in Netflix and Coach JB and all this shit going on there versus the actual experience of being a coach there without, a camera crew and Netflix following you guys around all the time,
I think honestly, it's that wasn't that far off as far as
right.
Coach Brown's, he's on their ass and he's old school. And, I'll tell you what, he actually won there. I mean, whether, there's a lot of things that I can't say I agree with or whatever, but he recruited his ass off, maybe broke a few rules and all that. But like I said, JUCO is wild. That's what I grew up in. My dad, when I was born in Garden City, Kansas. Garden City, I think, is probably one of the best JUCOs of all, right? That's Tyreek Hill, Corey Dillon. I mean, I could go, all these NFL players went through there, and that's where my dad was. So, I mean, I grew up, oh man, I mean, I could write a book about how tough it is. Cause I mean, just first of all, it creates a weird dynamic too. Cause you have to have what would be, you'd get all these kids from out of state, and then you have all these kids from Kansas that are like country white dudes. And then you get all these kids from Florida, all these kids from wherever that might not have had grades. You guys put them all in a dorm together. And then what you do is you can only have a certain amount of kids from out of state. So when the season starts, you have 100 kids from out of state, and then only 20 of them can play. And then when those 80 can't play, what do you think happens? And they're not playing. They hate everybody. They ain't gonna listen to nobody.
Yeah.
So, and for the most part, so it's in a small town in the middle of Kansas with like crazy shit going on. I mean, it's a movie. I mean, and I think that doesn't even show crazy things that would happen in a lot of JUCOs. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it showed his Jason Brown's personality being crazy and over the top, but if you could go in and like write movies about junior college life and how that is, like, I mean, the biggest thing my dad's coached at Baylor, K-State, all these places, and if you can coach in JUCO, you can coach anywhere. I mean, if you can handle that, and you can, how to communicate with kids and know how to figure out and help them, because these kids are all talented. Like by our team, we had 25 kids go D1, you know what I'm saying? We have Nathan Rourke was our quarterback who just got signed with the Patriots. And then we had a bunch of and they're all in the dorms together and trying to find a way, and everybody wants to take each other's spot. Like I said, I had 20 some receivers that came in together, and I had 5, NFL kids, and I had to keep a Kansas kid because it's a rule. Some like little, 4'9" white kid that really shouldn't have been playing. And I had to go and tell a kid like, hey, you ain't, the kid in the dorm. And I had to go, hey son, you're not going to make it. You think that goes over well? And like, you have to be able to handle that. And I was 24, 25, young coach at that time. That's a tough deal. You better grow up real quick or you're in trouble, so I think the show wasn't real. I mean, because it's chaos. I mean, even as crazy as Jason Brown was perceived in that show, I mean, you know, a normal personality isn't going to be able to handle it there. You can't go there and be like, oh, let me be nice to everyone, and it's not going to work. This is and you bring in because they want to bring money to the college, so you're bringing in way more kids that can ever play. Like I said, it's like, literally like we would start because coaches would do 4 days. We had 150 kids, but to evaluate and to see who we liked, we would do like 2 a day because it was 2 days back then. We would do like one group, and then another group would be in the dorms hanging out. And we'd bring them out because I couldn't coach 25 receivers at once. You know what I'm saying? You can't get reps, so we'd have to do 2 practices at time, especially at the very beginning. And then you have to, once you have to get rid of them, you have to take them a bus home. And this is fucked up stuff. You have to send a kid back to Florida, that took a risk to come down there, and you were recruiting them. This, like I said, it's a dirty business too. I mean, it's not fun. That was not a fun look at times, but I tell you what, it grew me up quick as a coach. I feel like I ain't worried about shit no more as far as, I've seen it all.
Right.
As far as that goes.
Do you think the transfer portal ruined college football? Like, we used to never have we had transfers, but like, do you think the transfer portal now, there's all these guys just transferring back and forth, and we had certain players that go to like 3 different colleges in 6 years. Do you think the transfer portal has ruined college football?
I couldn't say. I don't know if it would say ruin. I mean, it's just a different, like I could complain about it. Obviously, I think it's ridiculous, but I mean, I always think of it as it's like politics. I mean, it's the difference between communism and like straight capitalism where there's no rules and obviously we were in the middle of that, and even back in the day, obviously people were cheating and all these situations, right? But now, I mean, it's absolute chaos. But I think that's also kind of fun, I guess. I mean, it's horrible for the kids, and the coaches at times, but it's very lucrative for the top. And so I guess you could say it's, I mean, because at the end of the day, I mean, the kids that are making money and really making are the cream of it. It's just like a Elon Musk or something. That's the 5-star kid, right? He's Elon Musk, that kid that has everybody in his DMs and everything. And then you have Bezos too, who's leaving, he's the quarterback for whoever. And it's just, that's what we've created. And everybody thought it was the best for the majority of kids, but it's best for the cream of the crop. Just like it's so, back in the day, at least it was a little bit of stability for the average kids and all this type of deal. Now, if you're a high school kid and you're not Elon Musk coming out of high school, you are probably going to have to go to a level way lower than you would have, and I think that, I don't want to hate on it because like I said, we haven't landed on anything, but the biggest issue I see is you can't go back anymore. The NCAA is done. And the CAA tries to make any rules, people sue the shit out of them and they'll cause issues because these kids are getting paid. You can't go back on it. We have kids that have signed long contract stuff with these NLIs and all this stuff. There's no putting the cat back in the bag. It's over. So that's the issue. But like I said, I go back and forth. Like I rant. I have all these coaches I talk to that are buddies and stuff that'll complain about it. But you have to have a strategy for it. And you just have to, like I made a post yesterday on Twitter. I mean, you just have to be able to give these kids good advice. I mean, because they have to understand what it is. You're in the free market economy. You got to treat it like you're starting a business and you have sharks all over. I mean, this is like going to Wall Street or something now. This ain't like back in the day, it was like there was cheating. Yes, there was all these things, but it was at least regulated a little bit. You had to do it behind people's backs, Now it's open. Like you're a guy that trains receivers out in Florida or whatever. You're going to have a bunch of people that are like, hey, coach, hey, can you tell him that we'd take him as a transfer, shit like that behind the table? And if you're at like my dad's that coaches at Incarnate Word in Texas, he's all his best players, their inboxes are full of, every D1 coach and or some middle person that's telling them to get in the portal. It's chaos. So, and you guys know this, but I wouldn't say it's ruined though. I mean, I guess it depends how you look at it because it's still fun. I mean, it's still entertaining. It's still like chaos. It's like, if you like a little bit of chaos, it can be fun for you. And there's still going to be quality football, because there's going to be super teams and there's going to be, drama. So it's just going to be different. God knows what it's going to be like because things are going to change just day to day and week to week in this.
Yeah. So I interviewed Tom Lemming last week or the week before, and he gave a similar answer to a similar question. He was like, I wouldn't say that it's ruined, but like you mentioned, people have always been paying players, like NIL is new, but programs giving out money to their top players is nothing new when it comes to the LSU's, Alabamas. You could go on a whole tangent about schools like that, but what he also mentioned is that when he started, his recruiting or his scouting process, he was like, traditionally, it would be the selling points would be how good is the school academically, what's the, short-term history of the program, and how good looking were the girls on campus. Like those were the big three that he listed from when he started back in the 70s up until like mid 2000s. Would you say, obviously a few years out of coaching at this point, but would you say that, the overall vibe around what schools are selling to kids has completely changed? Or do you think it's still rooted in, like these are the top qualities of our school, and then, also you can get this much money or whatever on top of that?
Right. I think it's strategy that's still building by all these coaches. They're still trying to navigate and figure out what the hell to sell and how to do it and how to communicate with their collectives and find a way to package it and to sell it to their players. So these guys are going through it a lot. I mean, like I said, I know a couple of recruiting coordinators and stuff. I mean, it's just they're coming up with new ways. They got to get creative. You got to have different selling points, and then you got to understand what type of kid wants. What's he? You got to communicate with them, and you got to see that's what recruiting is, and it's still the same. You got to figure out what's valuable to them. You got to go in there and talk to the mom, talk to the dad, get a communication, figure out what's the most important selling point to get that kid there. That's called recruiting. Figure it out. And because the girl thing and all that type of deal. I mean, if you're a blue blood, and we got to talk about where you're recruiting from too, right? I mean, it's like, are you at USC? Or are you at Incarnate Word? Are you at Marshall? These are all different thought processes, and you have to recruit a different type of kid. I guarantee, like the blue, like I said, the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos, you better bring a bag. You better bring, that's it. That's the only way to think about it. But some of those middle of the pack guys, you could be like, hey, like even if I'm at Marshall or I'm at Incarnate Word, I could be like, hey, treat it like JUCO. Come here, you come ball out, you'll get a bag. I'll help you. We're going to develop you. These other D1s are not developing. You're going to go there and get that light bag. But how about you come to Marshall or to Incarnate Word of a non-Power 5 or FCS, and you come kill it here, and then we'll put you back. You can get on the portal here in a year or two, and you'll get a real bag. We're gonna treat you like you deserve to be treated as a player that's going to get some playing time instead of going to be the fourth, to go there and probably not play and always get portal guys over you. That's why I was saying. I mean, I tweeted this other day too. I was like talking about how like what you should do is like USC should have like Sacramento State as like a feeder school. You know what I'm saying? Treat it like what they do is they get all their high school kids, put them there, and then like they take kids from the portal, and then if those kids develop, they go from Sacramento, they play for a year or two, and then they get to keep them. There could be some stuff like that, but obviously that's highly illegal, and there's going to be no way to manage that. But that's the thought process I think a lot of smaller schools have to think too. So like I said, recruiting is totally dependent where you're at. But the top, if you want to talk about Georgia recruiting, like think about what happened with them. Right? They lost Raiola or whatever, right? And then that gave them how much money to go steal the kid from Florida State. That's what I would imagine happened. That gave him an extra bet. Why do you think he flipped on the last day? He wasn't promised. Then they had some extra money. Let's go flip that kid. And that's these are the things. That's what I couldn't imagine how hard it would be to have that communication with the bag handlers, like with the head coach, because that's sketchy too. You have to be very careful with that stuff. I mean, there's going to be every coach has a violation at this point of some sort. If NCAA is just turning the other cheek bad because like. They know they're fucked. I mean, it's chaos, man. There's no way around it. I mean, it's just they didn't expect this to be how it was because remember, it was name, image, and likeness. It was supposed to be kids ball out and then they can make money off their name, which should be happening. It wasn't like don't ball out, but you can still get it. You can still get money. You haven't done anything because like those kids like. Back in the day, the kids that were getting robbed were the kids that were actually balling out already. It wasn't, because there's a lot of kids that are getting money that will never pan out, and they never would have panned out probably. They were going to go to the school and they're going to be a flop because you have that all the time, right? I mean, you have a lot of kids that never made it. So it's just, it's, because like I said, I believe that the players need to get money, but before they actually made it is wild, and that just creates it's not how the original rule of what this was going to be at the beginning. So
right, and that's insane too, because you go to say On3 or something like the recruiting service, and next to the recruit's name, it'll be their position and how much their NIL value is scaled to be. And like,
I wonder how accurate that stuff is.
They haven't played a single fucking snap, and they already have 100K of NIL value, and it's like,
but now that is value because we know that that's the system, so that really do have that value. right?
Yeah,
Because
and it's
so it truly is because they know they can get it because now it's a competition who has the most money. So they literally are worth that money now. I mean, but that wasn't how it was supposed to originally be. But
right.
they are
Yeah,
worth
it's
that. Like
not
if you're
supposed to
if
be.
you're a 4 or 5 star kid, you're worth money. Period.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I was talking. There's a kid that was in this area. He lived next to another person that trains athletes here. He just moved to Lakeland, Florida. He's a quarterback. They won state championship, and he has a can. I'm like, the mom's worried about money. I was like, he's worth over $1 million right now, ma'am. Just telling you, he's going to be a 4-star kid.
You're fine. You're fine. Yeah.
So I mean, just don't mess it up, and just handle this. But these parents don't know what they're doing. I mean, because you have to sign these contracts are all. I mean, we're talking people behind, like, because just think about there's a lot of grimy people that want Florida to win or want random schools to win that are like, hey, and they're going to approach. It's just, oh man, you just have to know how to handle your money and and then how many years? Because if I'm an NLI guy, I'm like locking them in for 2 years, right? I don't want to give them a bag and then they get in the portal a year later. I mean, right. I don't know. Like I said, that's stuff that will come out. There'll be a bunch of documentaries, and we'll hear about that here soon. Just know, like, all these wild situations, and because I guarantee kids are screwing the collectives too, getting in the portal at times. There's going to be a lot of kids that get sued too. Where a car dealership gave them $100,000 already in a car, and they're like, they didn't get playing time, and they decided to get, which I already saw that with that. I think there's a Florida D lineman or something like that had some situation like that. I mean, it's just wild. But like I said, it's entertaining. You have to, these guys, and I said, it's the private coach, like somebody like me or your high school coach. You have to have good advice. You have to have somebody that understands the situation and what's going on. And you have to have parents that are willing to go and ask questions, maybe get a financial advisor. I mean, you have to start doing all that stuff and figure out how to get that money to work and not to get screwed and read the dotted line. I mean, it's not a horrible situation to be in though, right? Obviously you're about to get paid crazy money, but you could also get taken advantage of and in a lot of situations.
Yeah. Well, so maybe because the spotlight is a little bit brighter now, you hear about obviously agents or whatever taking advantage of kids out of college all the time. Or, back in the day when NBA could go from high school to straight to the NBA, just agents would take advantage of kids that have potential and people are hyping them up their whole lives. But say a private coach like yourself or a scout somewhere else can see like this kid has some development to go. So maybe because there's a brighter spotlight on the money being paid. And like you said, like lawyers or financial advisors coming into the signing of these contracts, that the taking advantage could be lessened a little bit. But when there's more money available, more money on the table, it's hard to imagine that, those snakes in the grass aren't going to always find ways to stick their heads up in those situations.
Yeah. What did I compare it to? Wall Street.
Right.
I mean, it's like Wall Street. It's like any capitalistic situation. If you think anytime money's involved, there's snakes involved, and there's people that are going to be taking advantage of people, and there's going to be even your family, even your friends, even your trainer. So, I mean, it's just hard to navigate. And, right. Like even I say private coaches are ideal, but even the coach could be screwing you. That if we were talking millions.
Yeah.
We're talking a million, you train a kid, and some of these coaches, are greedy, I do it, obviously I want to get paid and all this type of deal, but a lot of times I just like really making a player get a little bit better. That's like really where I love, but still, I have a kid and I train him since he's young and then he gets 5 million. It's hard to keep your head, it turns a great person anytime money gets involved.
Yeah.
And I'm saying,
like,
everybody around.
I need a little over here.
Which, and that's tough.
Right.
It's tough to manage for everybody involved. And like I said, because it's a capitalist open market situation. And in open markets, I mean, sometimes it's good, but there's always going to be people getting screwed. There's just no way around it. That's just the name of the game. It's the haves and the have-nots. And that's what's funny to me about this is like all these people that fight for it. I mean, do we understand that's like it's open markets? I mean, so
yeah.
Who's one of your greatest mentors that you look up to?
Somebody that I personally know, or like just a random coach?
Random, so anybody. It could be anybody.
I have a bunch. I'd say, who is Jose Mourinho? Actually, a soccer coach out of he's at Real Madrid.
Okay.
He's one of my favorite. I like Mike Leach. I always read all his books. Mike Leach is one of my favorite coaches of all time. I mean, I just like that kind of just unique personality, like him and Spurrier. Where Spurrier was a coach that I always looked up to, big time. Sir Alex Ferguson, another soccer guy. Trying to think in college. I mean, I just read a Saban book. I mean, like I said, I always study that. Like one of my favorite things to do is I listen to this. It's called the Founders Podcast, where it's the people that start companies and all that. Just have these personalities that they build. Whether it's a coach or whatever. And I like to study those type of people. And I think that if you read like some of those books and you read what they wrote down and stuff, I mean, you're in the company of old aged wisdom that is timeless, so I'm always looking for, those type of mentors, but for football specifically, like I said, it'd be Leach and Spurrier is probably my favorite just because I'm an offensive guy. I've always been on the offense edge, and they're like they're not cutting edge, but they're unique. They're not like, I like those guys that are kind of a little bit different. Kind of have a little like Pep Guardiola even too in Manchester City. These guys that are like, they don't care what people think. They're going to run their shit. They're, the kids like them, all those type of things. So I'd probably go Leach and Spurrier would be my top two as far as football goes though.
Yeah, dude, people, you only hear good things about Mike Leach. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. Obviously you've been going at it for 35 minutes now. Switching to the NFL a little bit, when it comes, there's always the top 5 debates and all this shit going on. If you're making your opinion, this is my top 5 at literally whatever position, but since you specialize more in the wide receiver area, what would you say you're looking at when you're making your evaluations or whatever in your rankings, I should say, and like, these are my guys? Like, what are you using to base off that? Because if you just go off stats, that changes every year, right? Like you have the same kind of 2 or 3 guys that are in there, but there's a rotating cast in that 4 and 5 spot almost every year. So what are we actually looking at?
Right. You got to think in the moment too. I mean, it's tough because it changes so quickly. Like Justin Jefferson was the dude and then he gets hurt. Right. Cooper Kupp was the guy, when he won the Triple Crown and then he gets hurt for a long extended period of time. Tyreek has been consistent, and so it's really that moment. It changes very rapidly too, and a couple guys, and then I don't think of it that, it's just how I have to be like, how are you approaching this conversation when somebody asks me or something like that? Like, sorry about that. Okay. So it depends, but I look at, film, I try to like really analyze it and who I believe. And then different receiver coaches value different things. Sometimes like I'm very high on Deebo Samuel. Some receiver purists think he's not as skilled or smooth or where he's a running back, all these different things. But I think that's a valuable type of player that has that type of skill set that you can use as an athlete, and you hand him the ball and he'll block for you and do different things. So, and it's the receiver position's hard to also, because you have an X like a DK Metcalf and then Tyreek Hill. Those two are almost, different type of guys. Different type of positions. Are you playing the same position at that point? Really? That's like comparing a tight end and a fullback. They're totally different guys. So it's like a different tier. You have slot receivers and you have outside and you have the athlete like Deebo. Like, is Deebo, Tyreek Hill, and DK Metcalf very similar?
No.
They're playing different positions out there. Yeah. So it's hard to make that list. It's just what you value. I'm kind of old school. If I'm drafting and I'm picking my guy, I want to have an X receiver. Number one, because I can find a lot of those smaller guys that can, do some different things. It's hard to find an AJ Brown and DK Metcalf and some of those guys that are going to just do physical things that, you want for certain situations. I can kind of fill in my slot receivers. I can find, there's a ton of guys that are, that I can move around at that H and that Y position in the slot. And then you want a number 2. So that would be, if I had a perfect, like all time, it would be like, you get like Randy Moss and T.O. on the outside. Then you get like a Hines Ward that could like block a little bit. See how you want to fill it in. Like, even though Hines Ward's probably not a top 15 to a lot of people, but you want to have a full core properly, so am I making a team or I'm making pure, like my top 5, like, obviously Jerry Rice is in there too when I was talking about that, but he'd be like a Y. I'd put him at Y, and then you'd get a guy that can slot, or Steve Smith, somebody that brings a little edge to it. So like, it's just like, you have to really set that parameter of how you want to evaluate what are you looking for in your top 5. So
I hear you.
You want to go ahead?
Well, if you got another one, go for it. But I think, 40 minutes, we should probably wrap up.
You might cut out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, brother.
All right. I'm gonna start the last question. It's not really much. Last question. How can people
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
yes,
hear
sir.
You. How can people find you on social media? How can people find you?
Oh, what the hell happened?
Oh, you hear me?
Good.
I don't know what the deal is.
Oh, can you hear now? No.
All right. Well, Jordan finishes that recovery process up. I'll reiterate before, Tyler asks his last question and then we bounce out of here. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Jordan, you back?
You got to unmute it.
I don't think I. Oh, it says
Can you
that
hear
his
me?
mic. Yeah. You're back.
Okay, good. I don't know what happened.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
my phone is
you
dying.
can hear now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Bet.
So I was going to follow the last question, so we don't want to take up too much of your time. I was going to follow up. How can people find you? How can everybody in America and Total Pole Nation can find you?
I don't have Instagram or anything like. I just have Twitter. I mean, I'm just on Twitter at Jordan Gush.
Yep.
You go on there. I'm open in the DMs. I like talking ball and all that type of deal. I have a bunch of coaches that I talk to, and I think it's a great place to network and communicate as far as sports goes. So I'm always on there. And then down here, I have my own business, so I have a bunch of, if any athlete or anybody needs extra work, I do some stuff online with people. Like I'll share my screen and we'll do some film work. I can help program in the weight room. And then in person, if you're in Bradenton or Sarasota or Tampa area, I train out of a nice gym here called FitCrew. That has, we have over $1 million worth of equipment and all that type of stuff. So good facility. So that's the best way would be just at Jordan Gush on X. Get me there.
Perfect. Yeah, that, ladies and gentlemen, has been scrolling in the ticker for this show. So at any point you're watching, you want to get in contact with Jordan through Twitter, it's in the ticker. Definitely hit him up there if you want to talk some ball. Jordan, thanks, man. This has been great. Can't appreciate you more for the time. Totem Pole Nation, Jordan Gush, talking ball, Lambo and Matt's World of Sports. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff as usual. And to reiterate, to help the boys out, the merch link is in the ticker, totempolenation.com. You can get some t-shirts, some hats, some hoodies, cups, bags, whatever you need. Jordan, thanks again, brother. We're going to hop out of here. Can't appreciate your time more, man.
Salute, man. Anytime.
See you, brother.